Welcome to the New Europe studios, where you can watch us make the news. Today I'm with Michael Cramer, Green member of the European Parliament from Germany, who's going to talk to us about two projects that are very close to his heart and very, very informative about Europe and the history of Europe. And this is cycle paths. We've got several long-range cycle paths going all the way through Europe, and Mr. Cramer has not only been responsible for seeing these through the European Parliament and the European infrastructures, he actually is one of the founders who came up with the idea. Now there are two in particular we're going to talk about today, but first of all, Mr. Cramer, I'd like you to explain to me about the largest path network that we're just putting in place, the Iron Curtain Trail. Could you tell me what gave you the idea for this, and what is this trail?
Yeah, that is a trail along the former western border of the Warsaw Pact states. It is 10,000 kilometers long, runs through 20 countries, and 15 of them are now member states of the European Union. And if I would have told you that 25 years ago, that would be reality, you would have said, this guy is crazy. But it's our reality. And we have a slogan, only the one who knows the past will master the future. We all want to master the future, therefore we have to look at the past. And this Iron Curtain Trail is a ride in history, politics, culture and nature. And the first idea, I come from Berlin, was 15 years ago, when we thought, okay, where the wall used to be in Berlin, there should be a cycle path. And we got a majority out of the opposition.
Yep.
And today it is signposted, built in a bicycle-friendly manner, and is a touristic highlight. Because 80% of the tourists coming to Berlin, when they ask why do you come to Berlin, because of the history.
Yes.
And of course, we had in Europe a bad history. And Germany played a very, very bad role. But in this year, we remember the beginning of the First World War 100 years ago,
Yep.
the beginning of the Second World War 75 years ago, and the fall of the Berlin Wall and the Iron Curtain in Europe 25 years ago. And all these dates belong together. Without the First World War, there wouldn't be the Second one, and without the Second World War, there wouldn't be the division and reunification of Europe. And so we can remember, because it is a very, very bad history. Lots of people had died because the countries in Europe had made war against each other. And now we have nearly 70 years of freedom in Europe. And that is not normal. That is a wonderful situation that we both haven't had the experience of a war. And therefore we look to the past because we want to master the future.
Well, I mean, this is why I think a lot of people, even if they're not the world's keenest cyclists, are very interested in both of these two trails, because we're in the stage, especially now when Europe's being challenged from so many ways and so many things coming up for these European elections, that this path isn't just a travelling through a museum. This is literally a way of showing of how we got to where we are, and the achievements of the European Union, which are not often recognised for what they are. Yeah. We're used to having the world today. We're not used to the world as being when you or I were young, and noticing the changes.
Yeah, and so you can say this line along the former border, and a very, very bad border, today this is a museum. You can remember. And if you imagine 25 years ago, it wasn't possible to cross this border. And if you have done it, you would be shoot down. And today, you can cross the border without showing your passport. And that is a wonderful development.
I mean, and it's also the fact that in many places, these borders were not just what many people would think now is a border, being a fence and a customs post. These were sometimes several kilometres wide, with areas where if anyone entered them, they would be shot, they would be killed. And today we're using these places for recreation, for a nice day out with a family, for perhaps a holiday. And I think that really says something about where Europe is, and the real serious achievements that we have made. Now, you're also mentioning the Berlin Wall Trail. Now, the history of the Berlin Wall is one of incredible tragedy and oppression. And of course this has been one of your motivations for coming up with this trail, because this is meant also to be like a living memorial to all of those who suffered under communism.
Yeah. You must know I have some personal experience with the Berlin Wall. In 1961, when the wall was built, for the first time I was with my brother, without my parents, on holidays. And then, in these days, there was a newspaper, Berlin Wall, a threat of the Third World War.
Yes.
And all the stories of my parents, my grandparents, the teachers and my uncles, which we couldn't listen to because it was always the same. Now suddenly, perhaps it can be my history. And I was frightened and I cried. And I thought, now perhaps I have a war like my father and my grandfather. That was in 1961. In 1963, I went for the first time, I was grown up in the near of Dortmund, to West Berlin. And for this trip, my aunt gave me a camera. It was my first camera in my life. And the first photos I made at the end of the Bernauer Straße in West Berlin. There was a podest, and I made from this podest a picture of the Berlin Wall, and there is a Markant house on the corner. And later on, when I came to Berlin, I always went to this place, and I saw the wall has changed. First there was the houses, and the windows and the doors were closed by stone, and then it was the border and the wall, and then it was the modern wall later on. And so I think there was the idea that I was interested, once the wall came down, to remember it. And therefore we made the initiative in the Parliament of Berlin to save this wall and to save some of the remnants of the wall and to save some of the watchtowers. There have been more than 300 watchtowers, and today we have only 5.
Yeah.
And that was a bad experience because the Berliners, the medias, thought at that time the wall should be erased totally. But you can't erase history. You have to remember history, the bad things, not to repeat it. That is very important. And now it is built in a bicycle-friendly manner, it is signposted, and as I mentioned, it is a touristic highlight.
But I think this is a wonderful European story. As you said before, when the Berlin Wall went up, because the construction was done over periods of years and in times, your family was one of the first to suffer, the first to be cut off. As you just explained, it took you a couple of years before you could go and visit your own family. And now we're getting a sense that we've reunified humans, we've reunified people, as well as communities, cities, nations and the continent. This must be a wonderful sense of satisfaction to you. You are, after all, a politician who has some real concrete achievements.
Yeah, that was interesting because when I was young and for the first time I went into foreign countries, the Netherlands, France and the United Kingdom. And the reaction was nearly the same. After some time I had friends there, they told me, okay Michael, you are a nice guys, but with the Germans, no contact. They are so bad what they did in the Second World War. And when I came to the United Kingdom, they recognized my German accent. And then they asked me very friendly, from which city in the Netherlands do you come from? Because they didn't want to mention German.
Yeah.
And of course it was very, very bad history, but we have overcome this. Arch enemies between Germany and France. The young population can't imagine that it was the case, but it was the case. And therefore I tell the young people today, look at us. We made the overcome of the enemies between Germany and the Netherlands, Germany and France, Germany and England. But it's now up to you to make it with our eastern neighbors, with the Czechs, with the Poland. And you have one advantage. You know it is possible. Because my parents, my uncles didn't imagine that it could be possible to overcome the arch enemies between Germany and France.
Well, I mean, this is one of the ways where we can see that Germany and Germans themselves have made taken such an enormous lesson from history that perhaps the rest of us should also be equally catching up with. And we see this idea and this engine for reunification, for repairing of damage, and for not hating the foreigner, the other, has got very fertile ground in Germany.
Yeah, but it wasn't up to the Germans that it was possible. It was those enemies with Germany made an invasion in the Second World War. And they said, we will not repeat the lesson from the First World War, the range. We want to look not back, we want to look forward. And then they thought, okay, with coal and steel, we made a community. We will not make war because of the resources of the world. And that was the beginning of the European Union, and it developed. And that is a good example, a unification all over the world, but that is the future.
I mean, when you're talking about the future as well, you're saying the old lesson, the old cliche, that you must understand the past to build a future, and this is entirely what you've done. And when we can see this, we can see trends, we can see things in history. Mr. Cramer was telling me earlier that you gave up cars a long time ago. Tell me a little bit about giving up the motor car.
Because it was in 1979 I gave up my own car. Because since then I'm very mobile without a car. And because I was fighting against nuclear energy, and with the energy I went to the transport sector, and I did know without a change of mobility you can't fight against nuclear power and for a stop of the climate change. And so, and I could see it is possible. I went to Berlin, and because I lived in the city center, near the city center of West Berlin, and when I came home in the evening, I had to look sometimes half an hour for a parking spot. And in the morning, or then I thought, oh, do I move my car? And later on I have to look for a parking spot, or I take the underground or public transport or bicycle. And so I said, sometimes 2 months I didn't move my car. And you must know, no capitalist is buying a machine which only runs 1 hour a day.
Yeah.
And so I did it away, and I saved a lot of money, I saved a lot of time, and of course, when you ride your bike, it is healthy. Those who are riding a bike are 3 times less ill than others. And so it is fine, and so I'm mobile, and I will save the climate.
I mean, this is one of the things where a lot of different policies all come together on something as humble as a cycle path, isn't it? Because this is about health, this is about sustainability, this is about having appropriate transport systems for people as well. And you know, if Mr. Cramer gave up his car in 1979, I think people then would have said you were crazy.
Yeah, of course.
But I can tell you right now, here in Brussels, I do not have a car. I've not had a car for a decade here. And nobody thinks I'm crazy for that. So
you are not crazy, you are clever.
Thank you very much. But you are one of the innovators and one of the first people who've done that. And this is another example of how attitudes are changing and how Europe is changing. And now with people having all sorts of things with these cycle paths, they can use them for leisure, for recreation, for whatever. But there's also another thing which we mentioned is there are large numbers of people doing these trips as an endurance event almost, because the Iron Curtain Trail is 10,000 kilometers, as you said. And you've noticed that there's a new trend coming up in sustainable cycling, which is the electric bikes, which maybe takes a little bit out of the strain out of the old thigh muscles at the end of the day. And you're saying that this trip is being marked by a group of people travelling down the Iron Curtain Trail on e-bikes. Could you just tell me a little bit more about that?
Yeah, there is a group that are marathons on the bike. For example, they made the trip from Alaska to Feuerland.
Wow.
They made Paris-Dakar. not by car, by bike. And yeah, and so they now make, in the 25th anniversary of the falling of the Iron Curtain, they made this trip. They will start on the 27th of June in Norway on the Barents Sea, because 25 years ago, on the 27th of June, Alois Mock and Julia Horn, there's a picture when they opened the Iron Curtain, and then they go to Istanbul. 300 kilometers a day. And the e-bike is very interesting, because when I ride my bike, then people from Bavaria told me, okay, in Berlin that is fine, it's all flat, but what should we do with the mountains? And with an e-bike that is not a problem.
Yeah.
Or you can enlarge the distances, not only 7 or 8 kilometers, you can do it 16 or 15 kilometers, so that is wonderful. And if you know that in German cities, 90% of all the distances made by car are less than 6 kilometers, that is a wonderful possibility to change mobility by saving time, saving money, saving health. That is a win-win-win situation. And that is wonderful.
That certainly is a win-win situation, as indeed is the construction of not just these two paths that we've mentioned, but there's a whole network which we will be explaining more about later. We've covered also in our paper, and on our website you'll find more information.
Now, one remark to that, because we have an increase of bicycle tourism.
Yes.
In the last decades by 20% every year.
Every year?
Every year by 20%. And all research have found out that bicycle tourists spend more money a day than auto tourists.
Yeah.
30 years ago they thought, oh, bicycle tourists, students of school and university, poor people. The opposite is the reality.
Yeah.
I know bicycle riders, bicycle tourists in summer, they have their Mercedes at home in the garage, and with their bike they are on the way.
Yeah.
And so they spend a lot of money, because if you have ridden your bike all day, in the evening you are proud of yourself. You say, okay, I want a good food, a good accommodation, you don't look for €1. Yeah? And that is also good for the local economy, so it is illogically and economically a good thing.
Well, that's great. Thank you very much, Ms. Cramer, for coming in and talking to us for that. And I would say, as we're approaching all of these anniversaries this year, there's probably no better way to take a break and have a look at where Europe has been and where Europe is going, by having a look at these cyclepaths and maybe going for a ride or going for a walk along them. And I can assure you, having seen a lot of information about these places, there is a lot of very, very good public houses along the routes. So take a trip and do yourself and Europe a favour. Thank you.
Thank you.